The Office of United States Trade Representative USTR has just launched a Section 301 investigation into 16 countries, including India and China. Now, this is the first major trade probe by the administration of Donald Trump after the Honorable Supreme Court of India, US, ruled the tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act as illegal. Now, this investigation will examine economies with large trade surpluses or underutilized industrial capacities across multiple sectors. Now, first of all, let's understand about this Section 301. Now, Section 301 is a part of the Trade Act of 1974 of US. There are sections 301 to 310, which empowers this particular act and empowers the Office of the US Trade Representative, USTR, to investigate foreign trade practices that may violate trade agreements or unfairly restrict US commerce. Now, this law, it actually allows the USTR to initiate investigations independently or based on complaints, examine foreign government policies affecting the trade, and impose remedies such as tariffs or other trade restrictions as well. And as a result, Section 301, it actually serves as the US government's primary legal instrument for responding to perceived unfair trade practices by other countries. Now, several trade experts, they note that most countries targeted in this investigation have trade deficits in goods with the US. The probe is moving quickly with a short window for public comments and hearings scheduled for early May, and this could mean that fresh tariffs could be imposed on India and other countries after May. See, first of all, we need to understand that why have USTR targeted India? See, the USTR has targeted India for structural excess capacity in several manufacturing sectors. It is noted that India recorded a $58 billion trade surplus with the US in 2025, with global surpluses in textile, healthcare products, construction material, and automobiles. Now, the USTR also highlighted excess capacity in sectors such as solar modules, petrochemicals, steel, stating India's solar module production is nearly 3 times higher than that its domestic demand. And also, one very important thing is that this particular US investigation, it comes as India and US are negotiating a trade deal that is yet to be formally signed. There's an interim trade agreement which is already in place, but the formal trade deal is yet to be signed, and India has indicated that talks will resume once there is a clarity on tariff policies. Now, meanwhile, the US argues that structural excess capacity in manufacturing sectors amongst the trade partners undermines its efforts to reshore supply chains and create domestic jobs. And according to USTR, government-supported overcapacity leads to overproduction. It leads to persistent trade surpluses and underutilized industrial capacity, distorting actually the global trade dynamics, which is why this Section 301 US investigation is there. Now, the question is, what will be the implication of this particular investigation for India? See, according to the Global Trade Research Initiative, GTRI, the US investigation, it highlights several Indian sectors where structural excess capacity or export surpluses may exist. This includes solar modules, petrochemicals, steels, textiles, healthcare goods, construction materials, and automobiles. The US notice points out that India's solar module manufacturing capacity is nearly 3 times, which I've already discussed, suggesting a possibility of export-driven surpluses. And similar concerns have been raised regarding expanding production in petrochemicals and steels. And experts have stated that this investigation mainly addresses global concerns over manufacturing overcapacity. And they have emphasized that India's export growth is largely demand-driven and diversified, though the situation will need to be closely monitored. See, now the question is, what will be the legal tools which US will use to impose tariffs? See, first of all, International Emergency Economic Powers Act 1977. The Donald Trump administration has invoked this IEEPA in February 2025 to actually impose tariffs on different countries. However, in February 2026, the US court ruled that the law cannot be used to impose tariffs. And Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, in February 2026, the US President invoked Section 122 to impose 10% tariffs on all the countries for 150 days, with the authority to increase the tariffs up to 15%. And then comes the Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. Now, this provision, it allows the US to impose trade restrictions on national security grounds as well. And it has been used to impose sector-specific tariffs on steel, aluminium, auto components, and could be potentially expanded to other sectors. Section 301 of the Trade Act 1974, this particular section is designed to address unfair foreign trade practices that harms US commerce, and it allows the US to respond to policies considered unjustifiable, unreasonable or discriminatory, though investigations they require evidence and follow a formal legal procedure. Now there is Section 302B of the Trade Act 1974. Again, under the Section 302B, the US Trade Representative USTR can self-initiate investigation under Section 301 to examine a foreign trade practice that may affect US policy interests. See, we have briefly understood that why is India being investigated under the Section 301. See, there are several reasons to it. The first reason is the trade surplus. India had a bilateral trade surplus of around $58 billion with the US in 2025, which has raised concerns in investigation. Then, India is having excess manufacturing capacity. The Office of USTR alleges that India's excess production in several areas is leading to overproduction. Then there is export sector under uncertainty. India's global trade surplus sector includes textiles, healthcare products, construction goods, and automobile or automotive products. The solar module overcapacity is also a reason. See, the US claims that India's solar module manufacturing capacity is nearly 3 times its domestic demand, which I've already told you. And it is indicating structural overcapacity. See, but in this case, US actually thinks, and Donald Trump actually thinks, that countries like India, countries like China, countries like Brazil, countries like South Africa, they're actually taking benefit of the US economy. And if they're taking benefit of the US economy by basically cheaper exports, where domestic demand goes away and it's online from where the people would buy. And US sincerely believes that its markets are being flooded with Chinese and Indian products. And Chinese and Indian products are actually snatching away the domestic demand and the business of the domestic suppliers as well, which is why these harsh steps taken by the US. Now, first of all, if you remember, we talked about one agency, that is an act, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA. Now, this IEEPA, it was actually enacted in the year 1977 in the United States to give the president the powers to regulate economic transactions during national emergencies. Now, there is presidential authority as well. It allows the US president to impose economic sanctions, trade restrictions, or asset freezes against a foreign country or entity or an individual. Also, it is used in foreign policy as well. See, this particular law, it is widely used to enforce sanctions related to national security, terrorism, and nuclear proliferation and international conflicts. So in any of these cases, these particular tariffs, these particular sanctions by the US will be imposed on any of the countries which is against the interest of the Western superpowers and the European superpowers. That is basically NATO. So, which is why what we need to see here is not just from the lens of an American citizen of US, but from the lens of Chinese perspective as well, that what China is doing to boost its manufacturing capacity and its buildings and everything, and how US is doing it. Just if that comparison is properly made, a proper analysis of which is good, which is bad could be very well made. See, now we very clearly understand the psyche of Donald Trump and US administration. They simply want to restrict trade, restrict international trade. They want to export more and import less. But for a developed country like US, it is not possible because there would be always some countries which would be having cheaper goods than US. So what is the way forward? First of all, proximity with the World Trade Organization is a must. Second, what we need to do is a proper universal tariff framework needs to be made, which is to be agreed unanimously by all the countries in the world, so that these kind of tensions, skirmishes, they don't arise in future. I hope you gained a new perspective about this particular thing in this session. Do let me know what are your views surrounding it. All the very best. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.